What is up, Canada, and welcome to the Maple Pill. As always, I'm your host, Matt McKeever. In case you guys are new to the channel or new to the idea of the Maple Pill show, I'm going live every single weekday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm going to take you through just a multitude of different news stories. We're going to cover the blue pill, we're going to cover the red pill, we're going to cover the black pill, the clown pill, and then finally the white pill, where hopefully I try and brighten your day a little bit. And we always share a meme at the end of the day as well. So if you guys are enjoying the show, smash the like button, hit subscribe. Make sure you're sharing this on social media, because social media is going to do me no services with some of the words I use in my title, some of the words we use in this broadcast. But again, really appreciate you guys coming along on the journey, because it can be a little disorienting. It can be a little concerning when you start to have to essentially reinterpret your reality as you realize that the corporate media, the mainstream media, the prestige media, whatever label you want to apply it, they may not always have our best interests at heart. As well, it turns out government isn't always our best friend, and they seem to actually be responsible for a lot of the problems that they then try and solve that create more problems and unintended consequences. It's quite a vicious cycle. But anyways, enough of me kind of babbling on. Let's jump into the first set of stories I've got for you guys today. And as always, links in the video description down below where you can find all the sources that we're going to cover today. But let's jump into it and get into the blue pill. So this first story I just wanted to highlight for you guys. It's a rather long story, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I really do encourage you to go research it. This is from Global News, and it's revealed how a web of Canadian doctors are undermining the fight against COVID-19. And so I think some of these doctors you'll likely recognize. You've probably seen them on social media. And, essentially what I kind of wanted to cover with this is I think we find ourselves at a unique point in time in history between what's going on in the world as well as our access to information. And as you start to unravel some of the threads, it becomes really easy to want to start jumping to conclusions and almost looking for the most extreme examples of anything in order to confirm your biases. So again, this article kind of walks you through, in particular, 4 doctors that have complaints filed against them, and essentially diving into what those complaints are and why the mainstream media and the medical associations aren't happy with those doctors. Now, some of the language they use here, again, probably isn't wise for a doctor to be using. So, if a doctor is referring to the vaccines as the blood clot shot or anything of that nature, that does seem distasteful. Again, I think context is important, so I didn't have enough time to dive into the context of all these aspects that they shared, but I do feel like it's a well put together article that I'd encourage you guys to go check out and understand where maybe the blue pill is coming from in regards to doctors and medical misinformation. Now, all that being said, one thing that I did find particularly interesting is one of the doctors, or a few of the doctors, are involved in a group that essentially, I hope this comes up. Yeah, okay. That essentially gives medical exemptions, and you could essentially pay for a fee to get access to these medical exemptions. Now, one thing that it doesn't really actually share is what the cost was. And so it says for a fee, essentially patients could get a medical exemption for masks in the vaccine. Now, to me, the devil's in the details here, and I wish they would have shared what that fee cost was, because my understanding is it's not that unusual in Canada to end up having to pay your doctor a nominal fee for like a letter for certain things. And so if it's a nominal fee, like if it was like $20, $50, $100 in order to get this, I don't think it sounds quite as scammy as they make it. Now, if they were charging an exorbitant amount of money beyond what you would normally pay for a letter from your doctor, then that would definitely raise some red flags and call into question, in my opinion, the good intentions potentially of these doctors. So again, really encourage you guys to jump into it. Like we've talked about throughout all these shows, I don't want this to be the end of your information journey. In fact, I really just want this to be the beginning. So appreciate those of you that are also doing your own due diligence, doing your own research, and those of you that are sharing stories with me on Instagram, as well as sharing stories with me on the Problems and Profits Discord. That's the best place. We've actually got a separate channel for the Maple Pill. So again, links in the video description down below. Go check out this article, as well as share your thoughts and opinions in the Maple Pill Discord. But I think it is important to spend some time and familiarize yourself with this perspective. The other aspect that I'll highlight here that I think is important to understand, other than the fact that this medical exemption looks shady as fuck. Like, I don't know why it would have all this crazy fonts and stuff. Like, it literally looks like, I don't know, maybe maybe the medical professional had their child put this together in MS Paint or something of that nature. But the other aspect that they explore is that it often can take years in order for complaints to essentially be processed in regards to doctors and investigations and things of that nature. And they're saying that medical information is dangerous, and it's important that we really reduce that timeline. I don't disagree with that in a general principle. I think it is interesting, though, that no one cared about this up until this moment in time when some doctors started going against the mainstream narrative with vaccinations. So I'll just leave that at that. But again, really encourage you guys to dive into it because there definitely are people that you may associate with being on your side that take things way too far, that, push things out of context, that make, bombastic claims or statements, and that does no one any good. Now, at the same time, some of the complaints here about doctors comparing what's going on in Canada with lockdowns, mandates, and restrictions to Nazi Germany, honestly, at this point in time, while it's not a perfect comparison, I also don't think it's completely disingenuous to make those comparisons. So again, the devil's in the details in regards to what you're saying and how you're saying it, but I don't think it's as crazy as a lot of the people that are on the blue pill or in mainstream media believe it to be. Now, again, we know that this is a slippery slope. And if we continue down this path and we look towards what some other countries are implementing, if we start to see taxes of them, again, yeah, I'll leave it there because I enjoy being able to reach you guys on YouTube and Facebook. So moving on, another blue pill story I want to hit with you guys is concerns over the supply chain and particularly what's going on in grocery stores. And I actually have a favor task of everyone watching this live stream. And the favor is, what are you seeing at your local grocery stores? Because I'm genuinely curious. On Twitter, I see people posting like empty shelves and, grocery stores that look like we're in a post-apocalyptic world. At the same time, you'll see other people claiming that no, that store just happened to be restocking, or they were switching their displays and things of that nature. And I don't know. I only go to the grocery store once a month at this point in time. I do, sometimes go more than once a month to the local little grocery store here, but our local little grocery store in Nestor Falls, it usually always looks like it's half apocalyptic, where again, they only keep a small amount of stuff in stock. So if, a dude like me comes in, you've got no peppers once I end up buying all the peppers you've got for sale. So again, I'd love to hear what you're experiencing and seeing, and let us know not only what you're seeing, but also where are you? Because I don't think that this is a universal trend across the board in all of Canada, but I am curious if there's certain communities that are being impacted where it's actually becoming harder to find the things that you expect to find in stock. But this article here is from CTV News. Grocery store closures loom amid labor product shortages. So, Sand says if the situation worsens, some grocery stores won't be able to open, threatening food security in rural and remote areas of the country that rely on sole independent grocers. Retail Council of Canada spokesperson Michelle Waislinshin says grocers rely on just-in-time delivery, meaning even transient issues like inclement weather can cause delays and shortages. But she says empty shelves at some supermarkets should only be temporary, and retailers are exploring all avenues to get products to stores as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, the Retail Council is also urging shoppers to avoid a repeat of the panic buying seen during the early days of the pandemic. If everybody starts hoarding, then we'll have shortages, she said. Yeah, that's usually how those panics go. So again, love to get your thoughts, your opinions in regards to that, but kind of building upon the concerns over the supply chain, I think we've also got a lot of concerns over inflation. And so this is from canoe.com. Document gives glimpse of finance department's grim outlook, warning on inflation. And so this is one of the things that really frustrates me, is that no one's calling out the economists or the mainstream media, or in particular the politicians that told us that inflation was transitory, when we all knew better than that. And it's frustrating at this point in time that they just feel so confident that there's never really going to be consequences to their abuse of language. So Ottawa newly released documents show the finance department last year warned that the pace of price increases could gain speed, even as the Liberal government and central bank maintained that inflationary pressures were temporary. Now, the other thing that really frustrates me about all this is the fact that they blame everything but monetary policy for inflation. It's the money, stupid, that's the actual problem. Kind of riffing off of that. It's the economy stupid quote from, was that back in the 80s or 90s? But going further into the article here, the annual inflation rate hit 4.7% in November. RBC senior economist Nathan Jansen said December's reading may be a touch higher when Statistics Canada releases its inflation report on Wednesday. And again, I wouldn't be the first one to call into question how trustworthy or reliable the CPI inflation numbers are. I mean, what's been your experience? You can do a quick Google search, or you can simply look at what prices you're paying at the grocery store. But not only are we seeing inflation, we're also seeing what they call shrink inflation, right? Where packages now contain less total contents than what they used to. And that's kind of a hidden way to pass along inflation to the end consumer. Lots of places are quoting that, meat, particularly beef, is 20, 25, 30% higher than it was a year ago. And this has consequences. There was a recent report out that said the average Canadian family is likely going to end up spending $1,000 more a year in groceries. That's not insignificant for most people in regards to what their grocery budget is. Hell, back when I was originally, just lean fire lifestyle, right after I quit my day job, you guys can go back and actually watch on the Canadian Real Estate channel. I share with you my personal budget. And back then I was trying to keep my grocery and food and eating out spending, I think, to $300 or $400 a month. So if I was to all of a sudden experience $1,000 a month increase, that would just blown my budget out of the water. $1,000 a year increase, I should say. But that still would have blown my budget out of the water by increasing it by 20, 25%. Further on in the article here, the start of 2022 has seen a backlog of ships unable to unload cargo. Supply logistics company Flexport counted more than 120 vessels waiting to dock at the busy ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. Freight booking company Freightos also said shipping container costs remain 8 to 9 times above pre-pandemic levels, even with a recent decline. And, go do some research on this, but you'll actually, if you look into, what was the normal backup of ships at the Los Angeles and Long Beach ports? Well, it turns out if there was more than 1 or 2 ships backed up, that was actually a big freaking deal in the pre-pandemic world, where now the idea of 80, 100 plus ships backed up or backlogged isn't that unusual. This is concerning because, again, a lot of industries have depended on just-in-time inventory systems in order to try and reduce costs. Last quote here I want to share. That will be very important to keep an eye on this year. If people start to behave in a way that expects higher inflation, Tombe said, if they do, then that may be a force that creates the very thing that they were worried about. No, it's not going to be people thinking about inflation that causes inflation. It's going to be printing press goes burr, just constant terrible monetary policy of just trying to print our way out of deficits, which makes no goddamn sense. And just that's what's causing it, right? More money chasing the same number of goods. Sure, our supply chain falling apart isn't helping us. The restrictions, lockdowns, mandates, the reduced number of staff available, all those things have impacts to the overall cost inputs of a good or service. But really, at the end of the day, the buck stops at the monetary policy of all the federal banks. And in this case, when we're talking about Canada, the Bank of Canada. So last thing I wanted to hit upon here for a blue pill story was WestJet to cancel more flights due to Omicron. So the Calgary-based airline announced Tuesday it would consolidate or cancel up to 20% of its flights through February 28th. That's not an insignificant amount of flights. As we continue to navigate the unpredictability of the Omicron variant on our staffing levels, along with the ongoing barriers to international travel, we are making every effort to proactively manage our schedule in order to minimize disruptions to our guests' travel plans, Harry Taylor, interim president and CEO of WestJet Group, said in a news release. So I just kind of wanted to highlight that. I haven't seen a lot of discussions on it up until this point, but a reduction of 20% of the flights from WestJet, that doesn't sound immaterial in my opinion. Have you guys been impacted by that? Are you currently flying? Are you allowed on airplanes? I don't really keep up with the current travel restrictions, but my understanding was that they probably wouldn't even let my kind on airplanes at this point in time, which just shows you what a crazy clown world we live in. But let's move on. And what I want to cover here with you guys now in the red pill story is kids and COVID. At this point in time, it almost feels like a reoccurring subject matter that we're covering. But I think it's important because, as I mentioned before, and I'm sure I'm going to mention again, I literally believe that we're sacrificing an entire generation of children and their education on the altar of absolute safety. I use air quotes there because there is no such thing as absolute safety, but gosh darn it, we're willing to try and sacrifice an entire generation in the hopes that maybe someday we can achieve it. And there are real consequences to this. But the first story I wanted to cover is from CBC News. School in BC's interior closes after teachers refuse to work due to a high number of unmasked students. I would honestly love to know your opinion on this. My opinion's not going to be popular with teachers or teachers unions, I'm sure, but I really don't believe that teachers unions have your child's interest at heart. Their best interest at heart. And not only that, I think that the teachers that refuse to do this, unless they're in a particularly at-risk category, again, if you're in an at-risk category, you should do whatever you believe is medically right and safe for yourself. And if that's refusing to go to work because some children don't want to wear masks, even if they're asymptomatic, technically, I think that you should have the right to do that. Now, whether your employer should put up with that is a whole nother discussion, but because you're essentially protected by the teachers union, we know that your employer will actually put up with it. But further on in the article, an elementary school in the city of Armstrong in BC's interior will remain closed this week as teachers refuse to work due to a high number of students not wearing masks amid a surge of COVID-19 cases. The closure started Friday after several teachers at Armstrong Elementary expressed concern about a high number of mask exemptions being granted to students, resulting in what they worry is an unsafe work environment, said North Okanagan Shuswap Teachers Association President Graham Gom. So I don't know. I'd love to get your take on this. Are you sending your kids to school and making them wear a mask? I've spoken to a couple of friends of mine who have children, and I really respect the fact that they called the schools and the teachers at the start of the school year and said, absolutely under no circumstances will my student be wearing a mask. Absolutely under no circumstances will you make them use hand sanitizer at, every hour on the hour or every time they come in and out of the building. I respect that. And at the same time, I understand parents that don't want to rock the boat, that want to go along to get along, that don't want to cause trouble, and essentially just bow to the school board's request. But I don't know, think about you being back in grade 2, grade 4, grade 8, and having to wear a mask for like 6-7 hours a day. I just can't. It literally boggles my mind that we live in this reality where that's a common occurrence when they happen to have schools open for in-person learning. The majority of the time, it obviously, at least in the majority of the time in Ontario, it seems like it's virtual learning. Again, that's my thoughts. I'm not a parent. So again, I'd love to hear from the parents as well as the non-parents. What's your take on this? But let's move it on to a CTV News article here. No evidence healthy kids, adolescents need COVID-19 boosters, who chief scientist says. So this isn't necessarily new. I think that this has been kind of making the rounds for a little bit now, but there is no evidence at present that healthy children and adolescents need booster doses of COVID-19 vaccine, the World Health Organization's chief scientist, Soumya Swaminathan, said on Tuesday. The aim is to protect the most vulnerable, to protect those at highest risk of severe disease and dying. Those are our elderly populations, immunocompromised people with underlying conditions, but also healthcare workers, she said. So, again, love your thoughts and your takes on this. The one thing I'm just going to highlight here is I kind of feel like 6 months, 8 months, a year from now, once we start entering next year's flu season, we're probably going to see this kind of whitewashed and there'll be a new narrative. There'll probably be a new vaccine that they'll be pushing that they will want children to be taking. Again, that's just kind of my hypothetical thoughts here. That's my opinion. There's definitely no facts involved in that, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think that this narrative will continue and that we won't see boosters pushed on children here in Canada? Or do you expect before the end of the year, they'll be going full tilt at your children, trying to get them boosted? Moving on, continuing on the theme of children and COVID, this is from CTV News. Parents crowdsource self-reporting website for school COVID-19 cases. Now, I respect the parents that are doing this. I think that they deserve to have that information. At the same time, I just think it's laughable and a joke that all of a sudden we just stopped reporting that information. Because before you could actually get that information from Ontario, from the school boards. And recently, we covered in a previous story on a previous day, they essentially decided they were no longer going to release this information, and they wouldn't essentially even decide to close down schools unless there was a 30% absence from teachers and students. So as a parent, I can understand why parents would be frustrated, particularly those that have children that are at risk, right? If your child is immunocompromised, if they are severely overweight, that is something that as a parent, it seems reasonable you should want this information. Now, what's unfortunate is when we're forced on crowdsourcing information, the opportunity for people to manipulate it, overstate it, understate it, all those different things, when again, the government and the school boards essentially have that data and they could easily make it available because they had been doing that in the past, is very frustrating in my opinion. And so I respect the parents that decided to try and do something to create more transparency or awareness. Frustrated that school-related COVID-19 cases are no longer being reported by their child's school, a pair of Kincardine, Ontario parents have decided to take matters into their own hands. We're parents of a 6-year-old, so trying to decide whether to send your child to school or not becomes a lot trickier when we don't have numbers and caseloads. So we went looking for a way to try and find more information to help us make an informed decision, says Keith Foster, the web designer and Kincardine parent behind covid.inkincardine.com. So yeah, totally respect that perspective. I think it's very frustrating when we're not just giving the straight up facts, when we're not given the details that we need in order to make informed decisions for ourselves. The same way that a lot of people that have decided they want to wait and see whether they were going to decide to take the vaccine, essentially now just get labeled with being, racist, evil, with being considered anti-vaxxers, when again, they just want to make informed decisions. And if the government would be more transparent with information, I honestly think a lot of people's concerns would be put to rest and they'd probably become more comfortable actually adopting to what's being requested here. But essentially, when you act like a bully, it's really hard for us to consider that you've got good intentions, because I've just never seen many bullies with good intentions, I guess. But again, link to this in the video description down below. So if you're curious about finding out what's going on with your child's school and want to try and get some information on the self-reporting of cases, I think right now this is really just focused on like Kincardine and area, but I'm sure we'll continue to see this spread to other school boards and districts if the government continues to be opaque and refuses to be transparent and provide us the information that it seems quite reasonable that you should be allowed to know. The only argument I could see is if they're going to say that COVID's no big deal, that it's essentially like the common cold, and we didn't report the common cold infections in the past and the absences because of that. That's really the only logical framework I understand here. But again, love to get your thoughts and your opinions. But let's move on to the black pill here. And remember yesterday when we talked about the Bank of Canada having an enemies list? Well, Bank of Canada today comes out telling you, don't believe your lying ears. This feels like something directly out of 1984 where they're like, don't believe your senses. Don't believe what we told you yesterday on a hot mic. What we tell you that's official dogma, that's what you're supposed to pay attention to. So again, this is from Blacklock's reporters. They're one of the ones that are essentially on that enemies list, or that the Bank of Canada doesn't want to field questions from. And because of that, I essentially feel like, one, Bank of Canada, please make that list available so I know who to go and start, giving money to and subscribing to, because essentially whoever you don't want to ask questions or, answer questions from, those are the people that I'm curious, what questions are they asking? So jumping into this article from Blacklock's here, bank contradicts audio tape. So Bank of Canada managers yesterday denied running a press enemies list, though staff openly discussed it in a recorded Zoom call. Bank Governor Tiff Macklem, Director of Communications, Paul Battersher, in an email denied blacklisting Blacklock's despite telling a deputy governor in an audio tape, I do not want to be in a situation where we are allowing Blacklock's to be asking us. So yes, that's where we're at. This is like, think of how little they think of us, right? Like how little they respect your intelligence, that one day they'll say something on a hot mic and then the next day there's like, no, that's not true. And it's like, what? Battersher yesterday refused comment. The Bank of Canada welcomes all accredited media outlets to its briefing sessions and ensures equal opportunity to ask questions as time permits. He wrote in his email, a deputy bank governor who attended the Zoom call did not comment. We have nothing further to add, said Jeremy Harrison, managing director of communications for Canada Central Bank. Management disclosed the blacklist last Friday, moments before the start of a routine video conference for news media. Blacklocks dialed into the Zoom call and began recording the session for note-taking purposes. Director Badisher was overheard explaining to a deputy bank governor that media were given different treatment depending on who they were. I know who's who. Yep, complete bullshit. And if you need a black pill, this seems like a decent little black pill to swallow, because we know already that politicians, the government officials, the administration, they only want media outlets that essentially are going to act as amplifiers of their message. They don't actually want to be asked critical questions. They don't want to be painted in negative light. They've got no purpose for critical thinkers. They see no value in anyone that steps out of line. And it's kind of refreshing, actually, every now and then. This almost feels like a white pill, just to be able to really point and laugh at these clowns and their approach to things. But technically it's a black pill because, don't believe your lying eyes, or your lying ears in this case, I should say. And speaking of interesting things, it's perfect that the background is on this. I was recently playing around on routers.com, and if you guys didn't know, there's an entire segment on here that's called the Great Reboot. Somehow I'd missed this in the past. I've got no idea when it originally rolled out, but it literally is called the Great Reboot. So one, I guess I respect them for not literally just copying the brand, the Great Reset, but I find this definitely a black pill moment. How companies and countries are reimagining the way we work, live, and play. So I guess if I really want to go black pill on this, what I would frame this as is essentially the elites, the governments, whether accidentally or on purpose, had a leak probably occur in Wuhan that leaked COVID-19. And because of this, they're now trying to reimagine or reboot or rebuild or build back better or reset things how they see fit. So they got us into this problem, and now they're going to use this problem to their advantage. I think that about sums it up. And I don't know, it's just kind of interesting, some of the stories here. So again, link the video description down below. You guys dive into it yourself. But I just wanted to highlight this one. We really have a collapse of trust in democracies. Goddamn, I'm going to mispronounce this. Autocracies outdo democracies on public trust survey. Interesting. So one, they're saying that essentially dictators do better and have higher trust than democracies. Well, I think that really calls into questions a couple things. One, how free were the individuals answering the surveys that essentially have to answer to tyrannical governments? And two, just because people don't trust democracies doesn't, like, high trust in government that's unfounded isn't a good thing. And yet it's fascinating to see that the narrative here essentially is the assumption that you should trust your government. Remind me why we should trust our government again? Because I actually come pretty thin on answers these days when thinking about why I should trust anyone that would want to govern me. I mean, I don't go around just telling people what to do needlessly and just believing that I know better than they do. I want people to ask critical questions. I want people to do their own research. I want them to make their own informed decisions. So again, I just thought this was hilarious that there's an entire section here on the website called The Great Reboot. Again, this might have been here for years for all I know, but something makes me think that this only came out during the COVID era. But let's move on to another black pill story. And this one, I don't know. This one just seems wild to me. Something strange happening in Canadian politics, the Hill Times. So this is an article from the Hill Times. I picked it up on canadaNewsMedia.ca. And essentially what they're trying to do with this article is say that, you know, we essentially have Trumpism here in Canada, that we've got these extreme politicians on the right. And essentially you should be really scared about this. I gotta be honest. When I'm looking at the politicians they're highlighting here, you know, other than Bernier, who essentially he is a bit more playful on Twitter than your average Canadian politician ever would be. Outside of that, there really isn't anything that extreme going on here. And to highlight Aaron O'Toole as some sort of like crazy, you know, right radical or someone that's deranged, just seems wild in my opinion. This guy literally is just like, I don't know, liberal light. What else could you call him? He lives up to his name, O'Toole. But let's get into this article a little bit, and then I'll lambaste it a bit more. Chelsea, Quebec. Something strange has been happening in Canadian politics since the Trump contagion to the south. Voters elect a mostly reasonable, often affable member of parliament only to discover, as they watch their MP climb the leadership ladder, that they are not so reasonable, not so affable after all. That is, in fact, some are drifting rapidly from center to the fringe, even to tinfoil hat territory. Oh my God, this sounds so dreadful and scary. Consider the Conservative leader's recent condemnation of Justin Trudeau for normalizing lockdowns. Try and explain to me how Trudeau's not normalizing lockdowns when he's talking about he doesn't want his child sitting on a train next to an unvaxxed person. Who's the fucking radical there? It's not Aaron O'Toole. This guy, like, he's vanilla as fuck, guys. Consider the Conservative leader's recent condemnation of Justin Trudeau for normalizing lockdowns and single-handedly bungling the management of the pandemic by failing to provide rapid tests and PPE. By now, everyone knows that lockdowns are determined by provinces and not by Ottawa. Yeah, and Ottawa's definitely not putting any pressure in that regards, right? Didn't they have certain things where they weren't going to give money to certain provinces and premiers unless they played ball and followed or towed the line? Indeed, premiers are more inclined to ignore federal suggestions than embrace them. I don't know. I guess you interpret reality a bit differently than me. Yet is ambiguous about, and this is still about O'Toole, yet is ambiguous about his own caucus playing with words to hide the fact that there are some vaccine resistors in the Conservative ranks. So let me get this straight. The essential, one of the arguments here against O'Toole is that he doesn't want to disclose the medical information of his caucus. Under what circumstances does that even fucking matter, right? Did we vote them in based upon their vaccination status? No, I don't remember doing that, bud. So you can fuck right off with this sort of narrative, right? Like, and again, when we saw that, I forget, the Oshawa school board that leaked 400 people's names that didn't have vaccines that were teachers, like, this idea that you've got the right to know everyone's medical history, that's not the world I lived in pre-COVID-19. I've got no fucking idea. I've got no understanding why that would be the case during the COVID era, particularly when there's really no reduction in transmission. Right there, that should end the argument, even if you want to entertain the argument. I don't even think it's worth entertaining, regardless of whether it stopped transmission or not. O'Toole also accuses the Prime Minister of characterizing all vaccine resistors as racist and worse, which is not what Trudeau said. I mean, like, go back to the tape. We shared the exact quote here. If it doesn't directly say it, he's walking the finest line and bumping up against it. In fact, he and O'Toole are in agreement that some who haven't been vaccinated may be fearful, uninformed, or unable to maneuver the system. Trudeau's target is the small minority of willful resistors and protesters with links to far-right movements who are also anti-immigrant, anti-feminist, and anti-government. Again, this is just painted with such a broad brush. Just because someone has of a certain opinion on one subject matter, I don't think you can immediately loop or group them in with all these other perspectives. And again, even if they are anti-immigrant, anti-feminist, and anti-government, don't they have the right to do that? Like, you know, what's so crazy about being anti-government in this day and age? We talked about this briefly before. I used to consider myself kind of libertarian, but I'm pretty much full anarchist at this point in time. I am absolutely anti-government. If anyone that wants to be in government inherently shouldn't be, due to the nature that they want to be in government, that they wish to participate in the parasite class. Moving on, though, to the PPC, Bernier sees fascists coming out from under rocks everywhere, as he noted in a recent tweet. Yeah, the same fascists that want to check your papers, that won't allow you to open up your gym, that want to lock down your businesses or restrict the customers you're allowed to accept into your business, that want to force masks on you and your family, regardless of the fact of how effective cloth masks are. These are medical fascists. I just don't understand. Like, what's your definition of fascist at this point in time? This one aimed at Alberta's NDP health critic, David Shepherd, who expressed cautious support for mandatory vaccines. Yeah, if you're mandatory vaccines, that sounds like a fascist policy to me. You're choosing to make medical decisions for individuals, rather than leaving it up to them and their doctor to decide what's best for them. He routinely calls Trudeau a fascist. The Toronto Star is run by hateful fascists. They absolutely are, and we're going to have a story in a couple moments here that's going to highlight how Toronto Star is fascist, and how they actually hate you. But we'll get to that in a second. RCMP chief Brenda Lucki is Gestapo for asking Canadians to report suspicious internet activity. Well, remember that article we covered last week where essentially the RCMP was promoting that bill that would allow individuals to be under home arrest or fined if they were to use lawful but essentially hateful speech? Lawful but hateful, right? Or hateful might not be the exact word, but you guys can go back and watch the exact story that we covered last week. But yeah, this is terrible policies, and people should be called out for it. Bernier has his high-profile fans, including Dr. Jordan Peterson, the Canadian academic who made an international reputation opposing trans rights or radical trans ideology and taking on wokeism in all its manifestations. Peterson also liked conservative finance critic Pierre Poilievre, noting on Twitter last week, "It's nice to see a politician with some courage. You should have run for conservative leadership, and maybe you could bring back Max Bernier back on board. He has some spine too." And essentially, again, I don't know if you think Jordan Peterson's a radical. We live in different fucking realities as far as I'm concerned. If the dude telling you to make your bed, clean your room, that you don't have the right to dictate his speech is a radical, I mean, put me in that goddamn camp. I'll see him at the Gulag Archipelago. But Poilievre was flattered by the vote of confidence from an outstanding, world-renowned Canadian thinker. When chided by Liberals for his praise of the discredited psychology professor, Poilievre replied with typical subtlety, "There's more brain power in Dr. Peterson's pinky finger than in all the bobbleheads in the Liberal caucus combined." I'd be hard-pressed to disagree with that, to be honest. And I'm actually curious. I tried doing a quick search. What exactly was Peterson discredited for? Did he actually lose any of his... I'm just curious. I know he's no longer teaching, but I don't believe that inherently means that someone's discredited. And so I tried to do a quick Google search. I don't know all of Peterson's history over the last couple of years. I know he went through his own struggles. But again, I thought that we were okay with people going through their struggles, particularly if they're focused on making themselves better. It's just fascinating to see Peterson thrown under the bus, and anyone that enjoys his content or, would appreciate his support being brushed with such a negative caricature, in my opinion. But it is dangerous and corrosive nonetheless. Bernier is able to muster large crowds in downtown Montreal on a frigid January day. His People's Party of Canada is gaining strength in Alberta and Saskatchewan. As for Poilievre, shrewd, ambitious, coldly calculating, and master of the personal smear, he could well replace O'Toole when the time is right. Many voters would not want these harsh, angry men, no matter their politics, sitting on the local school board, never mind running the country. Really? Would people be that scared if these dudes were on your local school board? I wouldn't be. And again, I'd prefer no politicians, but if we have to have one, I mean, yeah, I take O'Toole out of the equation, because to even try and make him a radical just seems like literally a laugh out loud situation, in my opinion. But yeah, just wild. But speaking about how the left is fascist, maybe you guys saw this making the rounds on the social web, but new poll shows Democrats literally want you arrested, put into camps for COVID opinions. So again, links in the video description down below. I'm going to focus on this, though. This is from the Rasmussen reports. So they were part of the group that I believe actually did these polls. But COVID-19 Democratic voters support harsh measures against unvaccinated. So while many voters have become skeptical towards the federal government's response to COVID-19 pandemic, a majority of Democrats embrace restrictive policies, including punitive measures against those who haven't gotten the COVID-19 vaccine. While 78% of Democratic voters support the Biden administration's COVID-19 vaccine mandate plan, only 22% of Republicans and 41% of voters not affiliated with either major party support the vaccine mandate. 59% of Democratic voters would favor a government policy requiring that citizens remain confined to their homes at all times, except for emergencies, if they refuse to get a COVID-19 vaccine. Such a proposal is opposed by 61% of all likely voters, including 79% of Republicans and 71% of unaffiliated voters. Now, the reason this is such a black pill, in my opinion, it's not because the realization that a lot of these people would love to see us in camps, and they would probably do terrible, evil things to you and I if they were given their druthers, but it's simply how comfortable they are with this and how obvious it is that as a society, not just in America, not just in Canada, but in just Western society in general, we're seeing this massive division. I honestly don't understand how we're going to be able to continue down these paths over the coming years and be able to cohesively behave as one society. It literally doesn't make sense in my brain, but maybe I'm just a little too black pilled today. 45% of Democrats would favor governments requiring citizens to temporarily live in designated facilities or locations if they refuse to get a COVID-19 vaccine. Such a policy would be opposed by a strong majority, 71% of all voters, with 78% of Republicans and 64% of unaffiliated voters saying they would strongly oppose putting the unvaccinated in designated facilities. Designated facilities, that's a fun euphemism. While about 2/3, 66% of likely voters would be against governments using digital devices to track unvaccinated people to ensure that they are quarantined or socially distancing from others, 47% of Democrats favor a government tracking program for those who won't get COVID-19 vaccine. This is where we're at, guys. This is straight up where we're at. Legit. This is where we are. But let's finish the black pill here. One more story. This one is dark. Hopefully both sides of the political spectrum can agree this one's dark. This is from the Toronto Star. This teacher is accused of abusing as many as 200 kids. How could that have happened? Here's what new court documents allege. I'll leave you guys to dive in. When we get into child abuse, it's always dark, but I want to highlight a piece here at the end of this article. So the Alberta Teachers Association faced criticism last month after it was revealed it had investigated Gregory and disciplined him in 2006 by having his teaching certificate suspended for 2 years. While the association found he mentally and physically abused his students, it didn't make a complaint to police at that time. The association said last month that it was not appropriate for it to do so because if we were to initiate a complaint in another arena, it could lead to an apprehension of bias and potentially jeopardize the outcomes of our legislative processes. The revelation prompted Alberta's Minister of Education, Adrienne Lagrange, to announce that the province could move to take the disciplinary process away from the association, a union representing more than 40,000 teachers. After the association had Gregory's teaching certificate suspended for 2 years, it's believed he never returned to teach in Alberta. The professional body has also said the nature of the new allegations, which prompted criminal sexual offense charges in 2021, were not part of Gregory's disciplinary hearings. So, again, the devil's in the details here, and it's hard to know exactly what they found that was mentally and physically abusive towards students. But, unless it's the lightest version possible of mental and physical abuse towards students, I don't understand how it wouldn't be appropriate to inform the police of that. I don't know. Just fucking wild. And this makes me even just more critical of teachers' unions because I'm just not sure they care about your kids. But enough of the black pill. Let's move on to the clown pill. And let's talk about this article from Heather Mallick, or who I may just lovingly refer to as Karen throughout this entire period of time. She's going on about how social media is dead, new horrible tech pecking at the shell of its egg. Quick reminder, this is the lovely lady that wrote this article that was making the rounds on Saturday. The unvaccinated cherish their freedom to harm others. How can we ever forgive them? Well, let me tell you something right here, right now, Heather. When I get really mad about these things, I constantly remind myself about this quote. And this quote is that don't take advice or don't take criticism from people you wouldn't take advice from. So, you know what? I'm pretty sure me and the unvaxxed masses, the dirty, unwashed masses that you seem to fear and hate so much, we literally don't give a fuck about you and your opinion. literally all we want is to be left the fuck alone and allowed to go back to normal. But let's quickly hit this article here. Social media is dead. Since it's my job to be predictive rather than descriptive, I'm advancing what's usually said that it's in decline, not that it matters given the damage already done to human relations. Are you not doing a lot of damage to human relations by literally saying, how can we ever forgive the unvaccinated in a headline of an article that you wrote? And never mind that, it played a remarkable role in killing democracies before our eyes. It did, but not actually in the way you think, you silly goose. We kept having faux climaxes on that. First, Trump was elected, then he was diselected. Now he's coming back or something worse. Never say worse. History always has something in its pocket. You are the worst. You literally are the worst. Twitter was the worst I once thought. Now it's irrelevant. It's idiocy, no longer entertaining. I'm afraid I had a misanthropic fondness for the sensation of disgust, but it has vanished. Twitter's a bore like Facebook, like all social media is a magnet for the foolish. Anti-vaxxers didn't like a column I wrote on Saturday in which I asked if after this particular pandemic ends, we could find it in ourselves to forgive them. I don't need your forgiveness. You actually need mine because you're the medical fascist. You're the evil person. You're the person that would have sided with Hitler, with Himmler, with the Third Reich. You literally are. Anti-vaxxers didn't like a column I wrote on Saturday in which I asked if this particular pandemic ends, we would find it in ourselves to forgive them. I mentioned the cancer patients unable to get surgery because hospitals were so crowded. We've had to redefine medical desperation. Their pain and fear didn't rate very high. Yeah, we don't give a fuck about your false narratives. Hospitals were always at max, right? We covered this in yesterday's story. You can go back and look at 2018, 2019 headlines from your newspaper where it says, hospitals at 100% capacity. This was already an issue. Like, I've known people in my life that went to the United States to get medical procedures because they were concerned that being on the Canadian wait list would literally result in their death. And that was in a pre-COVID world. So again, I know that it's fun to have one enemy that you can group together that just encompasses everything wrong in the world. But the unvaccinated here in Canada, we are not that group. We are not that enemy. And it really grinds my gears, obviously. I get a little bit worked up about this stuff. But rather than put this under a black pill, I thought I'd put it under a clown pill because you're the clown here, Heather. If anti-vaxxers are furious, then no one likes them. Take a look at your numbers now, people. All industries decline eventually, including democracy, journalism, film, and carbon. Some changes are perfectly splendid. If mainstream movies are now sourced from cartoons, fine. We have Netflix. When Netflix fades, we'll have parties at my house, all three of us. Yeah, you sound like the sort of person that doesn't go outside of your bubble. And beyond that, I'm just really happy that the corporate media, the mainstream media, the prestige media, the Toronto stars of the world, you guys are actually slowly becoming irrelevant and dying an extended, long, painful death because the government is propping you up with all kinds of crazy subsidies and government money, which they take from us, the people. But it does bring me a little bit of warmth in my heart that a lot of the stuff you highlighted here actually applies to you rather than to me and mine and ours. But again, this headline, this literally feels like something that would come out of Trudeau's mouth at this point in time. But one more clown pill story that I want to cover, or maybe there's two actually, but one more clown pill story here. I just thought this was hilarious. If aliens landed tomorrow, and this was a GOP senator, gives perfect analogy to Joe Biden's failures. Imagine if aliens actually did land here or landed in America and they were like, take me to your leader. Would you actually take them to Joe Biden? Only one of two results I could even imagine occurring. One is they're like, oh, so this is like a figurehead thing that doesn't matter at all. Okay, take us to the person that matters, that has power. Or second, they'd be like, this is your smartest? This is your brightest? Oh man, you humans are all retarded, aren't you? Because, yeah, if we were literally just take them to that senile old man, wow. That's all I gotta say. So that actually did put a big smile on my face. Now, let's move on to the white pill story of the day. And this is from Rebel News. And essentially, Operation Greenlight, dozens of BC gyms commit to opening today in defiance of provincial orders. Hundreds, including gym owners and supporters, have taken to social media to decry the ongoing restrictions and to pledge their solidarity with the movement to defy the province's order. I think this is important. This is honestly so important. Canadians, it's not enough now to simply be sharing our words. You need to be taking action. And whether that's opening up your business against what the powers that be would have you do, whether that's refusing to wear a mask, whether that's having tough conversations with friends and family and actually making them look at the data to actually understand what's going on. This idea that the unvaccinated are somehow destroying our entire democracy or destroying our world, it's not true. As reported by CTV News, the province quietly updated the public health orders Monday to remove any references to restrictions expiring on January 18th. Instead, each order now reads that it does not have an expiration date. And this is concerning here. I'm so glad to see people standing up, but like the fact that the government's now just like, it's an indefinite emergency. I know we've been 2 years on this emergency treadmill, but let's just keep the fun times rolling. Meanwhile, we can look to the United States, who actually has less people vaccinated than Canada. But remember, we covered that other story the other day where Canada actually has less hospital beds per 100,000. It essentially puts us on par with Mexico, right? That's our issue here, is that we've ignored our healthcare system, that it's been maxed for forever, and it was just waiting for a soft wind to blow it over. And that soft wind happened to be this pandemic. But again, I'll leave you guys to jump into this article, and let's move on. Now, I've got a meme for you as well. I finally figured out how to get my sound to work here. So I've also got a video I want to share with you guys in a second. But jump in the comment section. Let me know your thoughts, your hot takes. Was I a little bit too hot on this stuff? Did I miss the mark? Do you think I overspoke? Let me know. But I thought this was a perfect meme here. Exaggerated measures for digital ID. This is the government being puppeted by the who exaggerated infectious disease, and mainstream big tech, trusted news initiative, who's being puppeted by exaggerated climate change for the UN 2030 agenda and the WEF Great Reset, which includes, the World Economic Forum, the Davos crew, and all those lovely people. But I'm pretty sure here I finally got my sound share working. So one, I'm going to need you guys to let me know in the comments here whether this does work. I'm hoping it does. And this is that story that I wanted to play for you yesterday, or that news clip of the leaky tank in Sarnia. And again, like I said, if you live in Sarnia, if you live in Lambton County, if you even live in London, Ontario, you should be commuting to eat at the leaky tank. If for no other reason, just to support someone that's willing to speak out against this idiocracy that we're currently experiencing here in Canada. So hopefully you guys can hear this.
I'm here to follow up on the last time I came last year when I gave you defiance. We're in lockdown right now, so you need to close the restaurant down. Can you hold a second? Thank you. I'm not sharing. Can you get sharing? Yeah. Okay. Okay, sorry. What were you going to do? Sherry? Sherry? No, she's coming out. Hey, what's her name? Okay, hang on one second. I'll get a time. Hey there. Hi. I was here last year. I know you were last week, a couple weeks ago. Yeah. And I used to do the one. Yes, please. Okay. So we're back. You're still out of your jurisdiction. Let you know, we're going to get some lockdown right now. Restaurants are not allowed to do other than the provincial jurisdiction. You're on sovereign land. My paralegal is on his way here. You can discuss it with him. Okay, well, I'm just asking you, I'm educating you right now. If you do not shut this down, follow the provincial rules, right? I are okay. Provincial rules here. There will be charges coming. Okay, there will be some charges coming. What kind of charges? You don't know. I'm just telling you. You shut this down. You don't know. If you don't know what charges are, when you're going to go trump them up in the freaking office? You either know what charge you're going to be filing, or there is no charge. And if you haven't noticed this pandemic, they're making these bullshit rules as they go. Right. So you're infringing on my right to feed myself. You're infringing on my right for my son to feed himself.
All right, guys. Well, I can't turn up the volume any louder, unfortunately. You'll just have to jump over and watch the clip yourself. But essentially, I love this moment in time where she asked the inspector what charges, and the inspector says, I don't know. And it's like, well, if you don't know what charges you're going to lay against me, this sounds like it's all just safety theater at this point in time, is it not? Yeah, it 100% is theater at this point in time. The fact that we're allowed to control our actions in the real world is beyond asinine, in my opinion, at this point in time. But here we are. I appreciate you guys for watching this video. Hopefully that meme is at least going to put a smile on your face today, if none of the other stories are going to. But I guess what I want to leave things with here is, again, focusing on what you have control over. You've got control over your personal health. There's no reason why you can't be in the best shape of your life right now. And so I encourage you guys to do that. And that's advice that I should be taking as well. In addition to that, we can focus on eating healthier. We can focus on building deep relationships with the people that are around us in real life. Get to start to know your neighbors. Start focusing on growing your own food. Start focusing on getting your financial house in order if you currently haven't done so. Start getting to the point where your income exceeds your expenses. Those are some of the basic financial principles I regularly talk about and shared on my Canadian real estate channel, where I focused on helping Canadians get control of their financial lives. Now, what I'm focused on more than ever before is what I consider to be the culture wars. I think that culture is upstream of politics. And if we want to fix politics, we need to fix the culture here in Canada first. We need to embrace that we want to belong in a meritocracy where those that are willing to work hard and take risks get to reap rewards. We need to speak out against the bullshit that's going on in our school system. And there's a whole lot of it. We need to start influencing the culture the same way the left has done for the last 4 or 5 decades. They've essentially hijacked the entire academy wing of our culture, right? Like, they control the post-secondary institutions here in Canada. They control the teachers' unions. They control the people that essentially are raising or teaching your children. If you're a parent, if you're an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent, we all have a responsibility to take on the education of the next generation, because they are absolutely being left behind by politicians, by the government, by the administrators. And no one's going to save you. No one's going to save your children other than you. Just like we've talked about in the past, no one's going to care more about your financial future than you. No one's going to care more about your money than you. No one's going to care more about your health or your living situations or your family's living situations than you. So we all have a responsibility to stand up. But the good news is you're actually in control of a lot more things than you realize. I know a lot of people feel very lost in these times, and understandably so. It's justifiable to get caught up in those emotions from time to time. Take a beat, count to 10 backwards, whatever you need to do. Start meditating, but then start focusing on things you can control. If your employer doesn't respect you enough and they're going to demand that you make medical decisions that you're not comfortable making, find a new employer. I know it can be scary to go out and look for a job, particularly during pandemics and lockdowns. But right now, there's a lot of businesses that just respect hard workers, right? The same logic was often used initially amongst communists and Marxists. The idea of, like, what's the best way to influence your coworkers is just be the best worker. Right? Be someone that people can respect and look up to. We need that more so than ever before, because I can't find a single person in politics that I truly respect. I can't find a person in the administration I really respect. And so it's up to us, the individuals, to do so. So again, appreciate you guys. Smash the like button, hit subscribe if you're new to the channel. Check us out on Rumble as well, because our days here are limited on mainstream social media like Facebook and YouTube. But for as long as they'll allow us to chat here, I'll continue to chat here. But I am uploading videos to Rumble. And join the Problems and Profits Discord. Find a community of like-minded individuals. I think it's a great community online. You need both that online community and that in real life community. And hey, maybe don't be afraid to move up here to the middle of nowhere, northwestern Ontario. Join me at the Citadel or buy a nearby property, and let's start building the community, building the future we want, because I sure as hell know the government's not going to do it for us. So appreciate you guys. I'll see you in the next video. Apologize, this one went a little long, but